So I still haven't finished braiding my hair, but I'm gonna finish this chapter. So in the last video, we read Timmy's forward, basically introducing Tabitha and how she's the witch. And chapter 1 is about the cranes. Okay, what's always going on? Above the crashing waves of the New England coastline, crowning the top of Raven Hill, the Crane Mansion stood overlooking the small town of Harmony like an imposing monarch. Inside this vast estate, not so very long ago, an innocent pair of eyes searched the face of a refined, mature woman. "Read to me, Mummy," cried 2-year-old Sheridan Crane, tucked beneath the covers of her miniature canopy bed. Catherine Barrett Crane was 43. Though her blue gaze was no longer as clear as her daughter's, her hair not quite as golden, her features still reflected the aristocratic beauty that had descended from mother to child for generations. The high, smooth forehead, sharply defined cheekbones, and natural slenderness were all part of the reason she'd passed the Crane's careful scrutiny to become the bride of Alastair, the handsome heir to the Crane fortune almost 25 years earlier. Catherine could still recall her first weeks in Harmony as a young newlywed. Raised among the privileged members of high society, she'd been accustomed to the brilliant bustle around her family's elegant townhouse on Boston's exclusive Beacon Hill. In comparison, the sleepy harbor town of Harmony felt secluded, almost rustic. Fearing she'd die of boredom, Catherine had urged her new husband to travel the globe with her. But their jet-setting life had abruptly ended when her slight body became pregnant with her son, Julian, and her doctors warned her to stay put. There's a hell of a lot of noise outside right now. It bothers me. Forced to remain in her new marital home, Catherine finally began to explore it. The cobblestone streets lined with quaint colonials, the lush town green, and the crowded little harbor, where fishing trawlers were moored next to racing yachts. Harmony, she discovered, had a heartbeat. Now that she was a few years older, and the anxieties of her difficult pregnancy were pressing down upon her, she found a surprising comfort in listening to its faithful, steady rhythm. There was Don's flotilla of fishermen heading out to sea, then early morning's gaggle of children skipping toward school. Noon triggered the canary's whistle. Canary. Canary? That's deep. I just learned how to spell canary. There's that noise. It's UPS. I don't feel like they came here. Anyway, Noon triggered the canary's whistle and the raucous lunchtime break for town workers. Then came the baby stroller brigade, circling the little league ball field like a tiny wagon train. Sunset brought squawking gulls, trailing the returning boats, and the reliable turning of the old lighthouse beacon, which had safely guided Boston bound ships along the coastline since before the Revolutionary War. How could she not have loved Harmony from the start? It was a New England dream, tempting tourists to turn off the coast road and shop for marine relics at the antique store, snack on fried clams at the lobster shack, and become entranced by the spectacular streaks of scarlet that painted the horizon every evening. Through spring, summer, and fall, the deep blue waves of Harmony's shoreline perpetually glistened in the bright sunlight, and laughter could always be heard bobbling atop the salt sea air. It was only in winter that Catherine felt the gloom set in. Clouded skies hung over the slate gray ocean like a weighted tent canvas, threatening to suffocate every living thing beneath. The streets and roads were icy and deserted, and Catherine felt cut off from the universe. After Julian's birth, she had learned to cope with her cold weather depression by jetting off to Aspen for skiing, Paris for shopping, or the Crane Resort in Bermuda, where summer's vital glow never ebbed. But ever since little Sheridan's difficult birth 2 years ago, however, Catherine could no longer escape the oppressive sadness which now clouded her spirit the whole year through. Most days, her poor health had kept her a prisoner inside the Crane mansion, and Alistair was no help. His usual preoccupation with the family business left Catherine to fight her bleak periods of internal gloom all alone. Perhaps that was why she clung to the only ray of light left in her daily existence, Sheridan. Absolute joy filled Catherine at the sight of her daughter's chubby cheeks and golden curls, but it was gazing into her bright blue eyes that cheered Catherine the most. Unlike what she saw in the eyes of her grown son, Julian, Catherine could still see nothing but blissful innocence in Sheridan's eyes, and that's how Catherine wanted her to remain, unspoiled, untroubled, and unaware of the blemishes on the Crane family's past. She prayed that Sheridan would never learn from Alistair what Catherine had over the years, how the Cranes had burned witches in the 1690s. The Cranes had burned witches in the 1690s. Shipped and traded slaves during the 1700s, and engaged in the murderous business of rum running during Prohibition. Nor did she want Sheridan to learn how in the 1930s the Cranes had treated their own depression stricken neighbors like dirt, instructing the bank to foreclose on any mortgage farm that bordered their property so the Cranes could expand their estate's riding trails and build 4 tennis courts. For now, thank heaven, Sheridan knew only the tastefully decorated world of her nursery, tucked into the mansion's luxurious interior, and the smile of her mummy, which seemed to warm her more thoroughly than the soft pink blanket covering her custom designed canopy bed. Hearing the howl of the February wind outside, Catherine shivered a bit as she crossed the room and picked up Sheridan's favorite storybook. The masterfully preserved volume of fairy tales had been published in the 19th century and given to Sheridan on the day of her birth by one of the Harmony townspeople, an odd woman who hired herself out to tell fortunes at society parties. Once upon a time, Catherine began to read, there lived a king and queen who had a handsome son, but when he grew up, he left the palace, and the queen felt all alone. She longed to have another child, but could not until a powerful fairy heard her wish and put a magic spell on her so she could give birth to a golden-haired princess. Little Sheridan squealed with delight. She knew this story by heart. How another magic spell put the poor princess into a sleep for a long time, and then a handsome dark-haired prince chopped his way through and woke the sleeping beauty with a kiss. Mommy was almost done with the story when a man's voice interrupted. Catherine, it's late. I'm sorry, darling, but you need your rest. In a minute, Alistair. I still, Catherine, he says. The voice was calm but firm. It was Daddy's voice. The little girl knew, but she never heard it more than once or twice a day. Like her mother, the little girl reacted to it by growing very quiet and wishing in her heart with a sad sort of yearning that she could hear it more often. Go to sleep now, my sweet girl, soothed Mummy, whose smile had disappeared. What about the story? Whispered Sheridan. You know it by heart, don't you? Good night, love. Sheridan didn't like the dark, even with the dim yellow glow of her kitty nightlight, so she closed her eyes tight. And they lived happily ever after, she whispered, determined to finish the story, even if she had to do it all by herself. And then she went and composed herself to prepare for chapter 2. Any format of 1111, I wish for Tina. Any format of 1111, I wish for Tina. 9.